It's the first time in a week I'm wearing something decent. It's like
just hanging out. How are you guys today?
Beautiful sunny day here in France. I'm good.
Me too. Same place, same sun. Very, very enjoyable.
So today we were going to talk about what the process of new work really feels like from a subjective point of view. So I wanted to ask you both how you experienced the transformation process when you were working with the Better Place Lab to new work, like how you experience this in yourself as a subjective experience. And maybe we can start with you, Joanna, and you can talk about your experience as a boss and how this changed for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would like to focus on 3 different elements or situations or state changes maybe. And the first one is very fundamental. It is what Lalou talks about when he says to appear in the business or in a company, an organization as a whole person. And when I read that in Reinventing Organizations, I thought, well, that's cool, but in a way I'm doing that already. No, am I not very, quite free, authentic, my bouncy self, also at Better Place. During this process of new work, the new work, inner work transformation, I realized that in the beginning I had a very reduced understanding of actually what it means to be my whole self, because I was so used to live in my head, be very mental, be, yes, very bouncy, but very much also, full of ideas. And I really only included this intellectual dimension. And what I learned in the process, which we also did with Bettina, and which I've also already done, in my, in a spiritual meditation group and in some other therapeutic settings, I understood that being myself includes much more than just my brain. And that it was this whole body perception. And that really was a game changer. So I think that appearing as a whole person for me in the beginning felt pretty much, as if I lived up here, and is as if I was always a bit jumpy and a bit edgy, because I was always just a bit insecure how I would react to spontaneous things, new things, and later on I understood that if I ground myself more and if I really include the perception of my body and also have an awareness of my emotional states, that it really changes so much that I am becoming a bit calmer, my speech might slow down a bit. And my perception just widens because there is so much more information I can include. And it might take and I could also see that it was from that space of not only my head to connect to my employees and to my colleagues was very different. Because I would listen to them not only with my head and thinking, oh, what do I have to say about this? What do I think about this? But I widened my perception and let my whole body listen in a way. And
how do you do that? What does it mean for you to listen with your body?
Yeah, I mean, it does mean, first of all, I do set an intention to just widen up my system in a way and be energetically more open to it. Maybe really just also be more aware of my breath, and then just be there and perceive this other person with more just with more capacity, and also observe myself more while I listen to that person. So I might notice, for example, when I'm with a colleague, which I wouldn't notice if I'm only in my head, that colleague is a bit scared, that she is a bit short breath, that she feels maybe a bit pushed into the corner by me, that I'm very dominant, for example. Yeah. So I would become much more perceptive, and it would allow much more of a dance between me and, my counterpart, because more information was there, and I could also see more where whatever I said landed in the other person, whether that person at that moment was perceptive and was able to really fully listen to what I said. So it made me also adjust my own, the way I would interact with that person. And that for me really, I mean, I felt that was very rewarding for myself, because I just showed up more fully. And also, I mean, it also was a bit uncomfortable because I also had to acknowledge, of course, my own vulnerabilities, which in my head are not so strong. Okay, sometimes I think I'm stupid, but I mean, I'm not so much, for example, in touch with my anxieties. If I block if I only live from here, I don't really feel that here I'm very agitated. And I had learned professionally to just jump over that feelings of insecurity and shame and whatever I noticed in me. And to bring that more out into the open really does create a completely different level of trust. So, that might be very subtle and your counterpart might not know exactly what is happening, but I do feel that if a person feels seen in a more holistic way, that just really feels so much, I am seen, I'm acknowledged, and that just creates connection. And on the basis of connection, we are able to also communicate more clearly, be more open, say more what really is happening within us. And then we can also be more constructive and co-creative at work.
Yeah, this is making me wonder if this ability to stay in connection with people, even if there's discomfort, or even if it's not clear what's happening, there's still a level in which you're able to see the other person and you're still sort of welcoming them to see you. If this changed how conflicts were dealt with in the team.
Definitely. I mean, I come from a family where I learned that in a way conflict meant that you cut the relation. So conflict was quite dangerous because I felt that if I have a dissenting voice, I'm not being loved in the same way, and I'm not being held, and there's no security. So, and that in a way was my guiding principle when I moved into that new inner work experience, that in a way conflict was dangerous. And intellectually, I could see that conflict was interesting because, I'm married to somebody who's very strong in mediation, and he would always say, but, conflict is such an interesting thing because there you see difference coming together. And isn't it interesting to explore different perspectives? Intellectually, yes, but I felt pretty threatened by it because I felt in a way my younger self experience would kick in, and so in the beginning I was pretty much either trying to avoid conflict, or I was very hesitant about it and completely apologetic about it and constantly saying, oh, I hope this doesn't hurt you. And, so it was not a natural, open, constructive, and free conversation, but pretty sticky. And what we learned during our, the whole training also with Bettina was that it's perfectly fine to be in a conflict and to have a different opinion. It's really even very important because if you want to lead in a distributed way, you need to be able to voice dissent. You need to show up with your own perspective, but that it was possible to stay in relation at the same time. And that was, again, probably this level of, I'm here, I see you, I have something to say which is uncomfortable, but I'm also seeing you in your reaction, and I am mindful of how much you can take of what I say. And this doesn't affect who we are as human beings. We are talking about one specific topic out of many others, and it doesn't mean that I dislike you suddenly, or that I'm going to, and that you can't be a team member anymore. And that really relaxed conflict a lot. Also for myself, it was that once I had discovered this capacity in me, that I could stay related to the other person and say something which might be harsh, it made it so much more easier for me to also be frank and open. And for the other person, it also was not so threatening anymore, because first of all, it was perfectly fine to also show your emotions and maybe be upset, maybe even cry, because I was there, and I wouldn't judge you for your reactions, but I would accept them because I had also explored my own vulnerability in myself. So in a way, I'm speaking about that, the relational space between people. I mean, first of all, between myself and myself, within myself, and between others and myself, just became much more finely nuanced, and there was much more space to say things, to experience things, and that really just allowed much more things to happen, and also much more creativity to come out.
Yeah, I mean, I can assume this also takes like a lot of practice and sort of like, I don't know what to call it, like, failed conflicts or something. In order to get to that place, like you have to sort of allow yourself to trust in experiencing it over and over again until it starts to work.
Definitely, that I think that's part of it. And at the same time, what for me at least, that's maybe how the way I'm structured, it really was very important that I had a model of that I really understood also intellectually what was going on. And for me, this to really understand that these are two levels of saying no, being in a conflict, and staying in relation, that these could be separated, for me was a huge, new revelation, which I didn't know before we started all of this work. And so also the conceptual knowledge helped me a lot to as you say, then to constantly explore this issue. And if you have with your colleagues a shared language of these processes, that is hugely beneficial.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that's actually a really good point for where the intellectual piece is actually important, because we could look at inner work and say like, oh, you don't need to pay attention to thinking anymore or to the intellectual side, but that the framework is an important tool maybe to know that it's possible even if you can't do it yet or experience it yet, but to know that there is a possibility. And this creates a sort of space to then attempt to move towards that possibility.
Yeah, and I mean, all of these, what we are talking about, I find it so difficult. It's also difficult to convey in writing these kinds of, sometimes of these changes are really subtle, but it is a completely different inner emotional and physical experience of moving into a conflict where you are like this and really afraid and not knowing what is happening, or whether you in a way feel I can go through with this because I do like that person, I do cherish him or her, but I can separate it within myself emotionally, and I can also separate it cognitively in what I am and how I am going to talk about the conflict.
Yeah. One more question I wanted to ask you about actually there's kind of two more things, but what were the sort of moments for you during the transformation process that felt like breakthrough moments? Like, I don't know, was that even a thing that there were breakthrough moments? Was it more of a slow transformation? Or were there moments where you felt like things suddenly were in a different space and you were now working from a different place?
Yeah, I think both. I think for me, I mean, the way how I experienced change, and also this change, was that very often it is, you are learning a few tools, things feel a bit different, you make one more new experience, which also registers in your body, and this is like a reference experience, and oh, this is possible, and that's always really important for me. So a new level of openness, for example, with a colleague in a difficult conversation is open. But I mean, there certainly was one moment which I strongly remember, and which had to do with letting go of control in our team. Because, me as the former boss, I mean, I do remember that in the beginning, even though I had trust in my colleagues, there was certainly often a feeling of, are they going to think about this? Will I have to, you know, will something fall down and will I have to keep it up? So there was, in the background, there was always a bit of wariness maybe, and just a certain tension that everything would be okay. Yeah. And I remember, especially in one of my roles in my team, was also to keep up in a way a high energy, yeah, to bring a certain level of liveliness and dynamism to our group settings. And I felt very responsible for raising in a way this atmosphere so that new exciting things could happen. Because if you are in a team and everybody's just working on their stuff and everybody is a bit subdued, you know, then okay, maybe, you know, maybe Bettina would say from a therapeutic position, I don't like that feeling because it makes me then aware of all my emotional stuff, which is not so comfortable. Maybe that's why I like to create high energy moments. But in my experience, also high energy moments have a magic because they make new things possible and new ideas can show up. So I would, in team meetings, very often, even after we had distributed leadership, find myself in a position where I felt I need to raise the energy. Or I need to step in if I see tensions and irritations which no team member dares to address. And I remember maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago or so, I was sitting in a team meeting and I felt something is different today. What is it? You know, I felt different. And I thought, God, I'm so relaxed. You know, what's happening? I mean, even they are talking about topics which are also, you know, maybe monetary problems or whatever, topics which were also maybe, I mean, I remember there were topics which were challenging. And I just didn't really feel responsible anymore to hold it. And that for me wasn't amazing. I mean, I really loved that that moment where, because it really made me really realize, okay, now, you know, I'm not the boss anymore. This team is going to be good, whatever, you know, whatever happens to me, because I could feel that after I had stepped down, there had been a certain vacuum of power, energy, you know, ideas, competencies maybe, and they needed to be filled in a different way. Yeah, but they needed to be filled. This space needed to be filled by others, and it took time until that space was filled in a way which really felt solid enough for me, for my nervous system in a way to fully relax. Just say. Nothing to say anymore. So that was one of these breakthrough moments, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's nice. I like the way that you describe it really as a felt experience, that it wasn't like you were observing the team and thinking, okay, they now have this point covered, they have this point covered. Like, it seems like they're going to be okay in terms of like an intellectual understanding of all of the different tasks, but that you actually felt within the team like, yeah, the responsibility has actually shifted. Like, it's no longer in me anymore.
Exactly. And also that I think earlier on, I might not have been able even to perceive it because I was so, you know, in my own spiel of, you know, being high energy woman, that I might not have even been perceptive enough to really understand what was happening in the room. And through our whole training, we had often and again trained this capacity to have a process awareness, to be more open to signals, what is happening in the room.
Yeah.
And that really also was very important, you know, that many people in our team now had an experience that they were not individuals, you know, doing their own thing, but that they felt the connections between each other, and that they could much more fluidly engage with each other. Somebody would say something, somebody else would contribute to this, somebody might challenge this, but it was much more of not a pop, 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 like we have in many meetings, you know, different individuals just saying things, but it was much more interwoven and a much more coherent, and in that way much more co-creative process.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sienna.
Yeah, that was cool. Interesting. Okay, good. We can maybe move on to Bettina. Actually, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting. Like, so as we're doing this, I'm sort of like observing how I am as an interviewer. And so I think, like, as you were speaking, I was sort of like thinking about like, okay, how much am I able to bring myself to the situation, which is different because it's recorded. I think like this adds a different layer for me personally. Like the recordings really somehow change how I feel in the conversation. Like I notice that I'm like 70% in the conversation and 30% observing it as a viewer. And I think this is really interesting to like, yeah, just as you were speaking, I was like, okay, like I also noticed that like I'm actually 30% not present. Yeah.
Mm. Totally, yeah. And it's
okay.
so nice that, you know, we are able to share that, you know, because this is a kind of information which is really valuable to how we interact. But,
Yeah.
you know, in normal settings, we would just always hide that because it's unprofessional, you know, to reflect on something like that openly. And, you know, when you started what you were saying, you didn't know where you would come out, you know, so it was
exactly. You don't know what you're going to say. Yeah. Or it's, I think part of it is that you don't actually know what the relevance of it is in the conversation. Like when you speak from a place of like purely how you are right now, you haven't actually thought how it contributes or what it means for the conversation. So it's kind of like, I say something and I don't know if it's going to go anywhere or not. And you have to sort of let go of the idea that it has to go somewhere, you know, that has to be useful or lead to something. Yeah, but it changes actually my ability to then be more present in the conversation. Yeah, Bettina, I kind of want to ask you similar questions about your experience, but from the perspective of the consultant. And both like how you observed the team changing, and then also like what your experience was in yourself of like being the one to hold that process of change as the sort of external person, the person who might be seen as like the one who has the plan, and how this worked for you.
Yeah, I really liked your reflection now at the end, because it's basically like how I feel most of the time. So, so I feel like in the way I understand development also, I'm coming much more from an emergent place. So emergent meaning that I feel like there is already something there which hasn't shown up yet in a team, the next step they want to take, the next step of development, the new form, whatever. And it needs support from my side to help that show up, basically. And that the support can be different things. It can be structure and focus. It can be different methodologies, exercises to create new experiences in the room for new elements to show up and so on. And it could just be reflection, feedback, or also like critical intervention from my side. So it comes on many different layers, but most of the time we are setting a kind of, like, I always call it like a kind of result horizon. I'm not sure if that's an English word, to be honest. It's a German word. So it's like you don't have one target. You have a direction in which you are looking and where you feel drawn to. And this feeling drawn to comes from either you have a lot of pain right now and you need something needs to change. Like in teams, that can be, we are completely inefficient, like we're wasting energy in processes. We are not happy with how we are collaborating. We are feeling we have no clarity, whatever, like a million different pain points. Or you are inspired by something. You read Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations. You want to get to something new. So, and this is everything we know. And then the way I facilitate these processes is that we follow together the process which unfolds or emerges in the team. So it's not so much, I perceive myself often not so much leading a process. I'm pretty sure the teams would maybe say differently, because also, hopefully they feel safe and held and oriented with me. But from my side, it often feels like I start with something, but that's very little. And then I enter into the process, into the next meeting, into the workshop, and then we see where what happens, and I follow this in the as much precise way as I can do that, without intervening too much with my opinion about things. I mean, I'm intervening hopefully mostly from a place of I have an experience around things, in the sense of like I have a competency, like I've seen this. I kind of like I can offer different options because I have experienced this before. I have knowledge and any other kind which I can provide there, but not so much about like what Bettina thinks and wants in that moment. And then there is like this interesting stretch in the middle of the process, which I always find for me the most challenging part. It's like you helped a team to understand where they are today and who they are today. And then we also discovered what needs to be let go, and what needs to be also dropped to create enough space for anything new to emerge or appear in the first place. And this phase is often characterized by insecurity, and like it feels like we're just repeating ourselves, and then every meeting feels like it doesn't end anywhere. There is no satisfaction from concrete results. There's often little structural elements we can deduct from this. And this is always the point when the team start to feel, okay, maybe Bettina is not a good consultant, because it feels really like weird with her right now, and Bettina starts to feel, oh shit, maybe I led them into a direction where we really shouldn't have gone. So it's really this interesting stretch in between, where I feel it also, as me in my role, it comes really down to this competency of mine to hold the unknown and the tension in it without jumping too fast to conclusions. And this is, funnily or ironically, it's also one of the competencies I'm training with the teams themselves. I mean, also when Joana now made that example of her letting go of control, it's basically also the same kind of competency in her, that she learned more and more to hold the tension of her that she can't control where the team is going with something, but that she learns to trust the process or the team members, that it will go somewhere. And that's the same role I'm taking in the middle of any of the organizational development processes I'm facilitating. It's like I need to hold a big space full of the unknown, with a lot of things we had let go of, and we don't know yet where we're going to end up. And then this is very, very like still very challenging, and for me, especially when the teams get dissatisfied and address the dissatisfaction to me, you know, like in the sense of like, I felt this workshop was really unstructured. Bettina, I really feel like you're leading us in circles, you know, all these kind of feedback. And I'm always open to also reflect myself, because maybe sometimes I'm leading them in circles, right? So I'm not ruling this out, but it's just like an interesting moment of holding free space. And I feel this is one of the competencies we really need in the current period of time we are in, because so much is changing so fast. So the ability not to need to fix it directly into a result, a reaction, into anything fixed, but to keep it fluid and open is what we are training with teams also when they want to become more agile, right? So yeah, I really enjoy this, because it's happening on both sides. That the team and me need to continuously developing this competency in us.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, oh, there's an echo. Like, I think in some ways you can think of like lots of ways why this would be useful, but I wonder from your perspective, looking at these organizations, like why it's so important that you stay in the unknown and that you stay in that free space. I mean, I can see that if you jump to conclusions too soon, they might not really be the conclusions that make sense for the team. You're rather jumping to them because you want security. And the confusion just feels too scary, so you jump to some conclusion that's like not actually the right thing. But is it only about not jumping to the wrong conclusion, or is it also like there's something else in that sort of confusion and unknown that like is in itself really useful and important as an experience for for working in a new way, for creativity. Yeah, I'm just wondering about that.
I think it speaks to creativity. I think true creativity and true innovation are insights which appear from where? Nowhere mostly, right? You wake up one morning and there's something new in you. So I think like when we jump too easy in these phases to conclusions, what we do, we recombine elements we already know into something new, but actually it's not really something new. It's just a recombination of what we already know. So this process of like the unknown and the known together is what, in my experience, also in organizational development, creates the spark. And it's a different way to look at organizational development, because we really have to keep in mind, normally you ask an organizational developer to come in, they do a very rational analysis, and then they provide you with different options of already very, very well described organizational models and their mechanics behind it you can use, and then you start to adapt that to your individual situation. Because I started to focus on self-organization and new work, and that's a part where we actually have not so much descriptive knowledge about already. We are all, every company who does something around it is researching in a certain way. So basically, in this area, it's so much important we stay in the unknown, because we really truly want to figure out how shared leadership, how self-organized system can work, and we don't know yet. So basically, it's an ongoing research project on that side. And I also really value processes where the teams use their own orientation, innovation, and creativity, because of course that ensures sustainability of any given step we are doing, and also empowerment. Now, of course, I could pump in a lot of knowledge into that system, but it will not ensure that people will truly feel they're creating something which fits to them. And that's the way I look at organizational development in the end. For me, it's like it needs to be a structural expression of how we best and want to work together, and which serves us not only as an individual, but which serves the product we are creating, which fits to the market environment. But there is a match, there is a resonance. And that's why it's so important in these processes that we keep spaces open, and that we learn to bring ourselves, like in the way Joanna was describing it, because we need this information. You know, I can't help you to develop the organization or collaboration model which fits to you if we don't know who you are and what actually fits to you, right? So yeah, I think like the true innovation and the true creativity, but also the true precision, comes from keeping spaces open long enough. Of course, you can also jump into the pathology of keeping it open and open and open and never making a decision, and then you have a different problem. So
yeah, that was actually my next question of like, how do you, I don't know, actually the image that came to my mind was like with art, like when you're painting or something like this, how do you know when it's done? You know, that there's a sort of moment when you do sort of know when something is complete, and like, but it's not, there's no method really that will give you these exact steps to understand when it's complete. It's like a feeling. And I'm wondering how you experience that as a coach with the teams. Like, what does it look like during the processes when you kind of feel that something is reaching a point where it's like, that's sort of complete, or that can move forward now and turn into something new. We don't need to stay in this place anymore. Like, how do you experience that?
Well, for me, it's a very physical feeling in the room, because you start to feel that what felt like moving and like very diverse and maybe even fragmented start to cohere, like come together in a certain way. And then at one point of time, you can feel, okay, now we are clicking in with each other at that specific point in time and structure. And I think like the most important part of me in this is that I really work with teams on their expectation towards structure and stability, which we need to change, because I'm pretty sure I'm not creating with any of the teams, and Joanna's teams also constantly is in movement and in change. We are not creating these models anymore, which will last for the next 5 years. It just sounds for a lot of teams like we are failing if we don't find this one solution will last long enough. But I think it's a totally different perspective to see, okay, we are really learning life is in movement all the time. And we are training with each other the competency to respond to that by building structures which allow change in a really good balance between stability and movement. And in this, what you can feel, coming back to your question, is like you feel these moments when we reached a certain plateau for a while. Like we are there. And you can feel this. This is almost like a click in the room. And then I can see it in the teams, because this is the moment where they start to work on things without me telling them to. Because then they clicked in, they feel empowered, they feel oriented, and then they say like, okay, we're gonna take care of this, and the next time I come and see them, a lot of things have happened without me, creating a to-do list with them and stuff. So it really starts to gain momentum, and then this will last for a while. And then the beauty in it would be if teams would recognize when they have to leave the plateau again. And when the next phase of change is appearing, and not to judge this as a failure or something which exhausts us, but to see that we actually worked on a way to be with each other, to sense things also, and to go with the flow and not judge it in the way where we feel like real professional collaboration comes from structure and stability, which at least for the German cultural field of collaboration is still often an idea we are carrying.
Do you notice that when some of the teams you've worked with, do they recognize when they've reached that plateau afterwards, and they don't actually need to bring you back in, or do you feel that someone needs to come back in sometimes?
Well, they mostly carry on for a while, having supervision kind of settings with me, like to really see, to have fixed dates with me where we can look at things and reflect them together. And then maybe sometimes they feel like they need to bring me in because they feel a little bit overwhelmed with certain conflicts dynamics. But I really feel like compared, like when I worked in corporate consulting, I'm very, very, very little with the teams, and they're working already from the start very, very independent from me. Like the ways I set up these projects are very different from what I learned in corporate consulting. I have much less like days where I'm there doing things, facilitating things. I'm much earlier in the process. They are on their own, they're figuring things out by themselves and find their individual expression of things. So in that sense, yeah, I feel they know, and they also know when they want help. And that's also something we are working on a lot, to say like, we're also not working towards something where you need to be independent in it all the time. Why not to pull in resources like coaches, facilitators, and whatever trainers, if you have the budget, of course. Because why do you need to become experts in this? There are experts out there, right? So rather, as an organization, learn to know when you need support and voice it, which also speaks to inner work, because telling somebody that I need something is also not part of a professional business culture, at least not as far as I know it.
Yeah, it's super important. Yeah, that was great. I think this gives me really good overview of how this looks from both of your perspectives. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sienna.
Yeah, thank you.